Welcome, everybody. Glad everybody's here. Should we start with a roll call?
Okay. Please say if you're present. Commissioner Moss. Commissioner Wilson.
Here.
Commissioner Murphy. Commissioner Hagan. And Commissioner Chang. And Councilwoman Cornmack.
Monique, I assume you're not here as a member of the public to speak?
I'm just observing as a
Okay. All right, then there's no members of the public here to address us. We're cruising. Next one is for the agenda that we have these items. Are there any changes, requests, or deletions that people would like to do?
Yeah, I had a comment that at the last meeting, we were going to be, among other items, supposedly discussing passport services and technical program statistics tonight, and it's not on the agenda, so I kind of wonder, is that going to be discussed as one of the other items, or did it just get left off? And if it did, when are we going to hear on those items?
The passport office, I had already said it was just in the beginning stages, and we don't really have enough information to even share anything. For the technology thing, we're still working on the statistics, and it will be.
So we were optimistic last month when we thought we'd have the discussion tonight.
The passport office, I think I had already mentioned that it would, we were just starting on that, and there's no information that we can share at this point.
Okay,
But for the
well-
technology one, yes, we thought we would be able to. Unfortunately, we don't have all the statistics yet.
Okay, we'll just wait until
The next one.
we have the ability to discuss those, maybe next meeting, maybe the meeting after, whatever you think it's available.
Yes.
Okay.
Do we need to, for this at places on the Macmillan Library, is that something that we would just include in like the director's report discussion?
We could, yeah.
We'll just have that there. Okay, then we'll keep the agenda as is. The first item of the agenda is the draft minutes of our meeting on June 27th. If everyone has had a chance to review those, are there any corrections or questions about the minutes that they'd like to ask? Cool.
I move to approve.
Move to approve. Do you have a second?
Move the second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Awesome. Minutes are approved. Thank you so much. Our next item is on eliminating fines. We talked about this a bit last time. And so I think, Gayatri, if you want to just take a minute to kind of like what's different now or sort of an update on the fines, and then if you have any questions, we can discuss further.
Thank you. Yes, the follow-up information on the library fines, I know that we talked at length last meeting, and we talked about how the offsets, potential offsets would be, and I wanted to provide you more information about that. And because we are a service department, the library is not a traditional, as we said, the revenue generating department. And the reason we even do fines is because we want to encourage patrons to return the items on time, not to realize any kind of a revenue target. So we generally don't have a revenue target to reach. Due to this, everything, really the fines every year depends on the patron behavior. If in an ideal situation, every patron returned items on time, there would be no fines. And these fines collected by the library, they're not included as a part of the library's budget, but they're collected as a part of the city's general fund. So this is the information that I think did not come out in the last meeting, and I wanted to make sure that that's addressed here. And if you look at the memo, you will see the amount of fines that has been collected, and we've traced like 5 years of fines, and you can see that in fiscal year 17, that's when we began, we did not have fines for children's items, and so you could see that there's a dramatic drop in the fines. And I want to say, also say that automatic renewals just started. So we're definitely going to see a huge impact on fines with that.
Awesome, thank you so much. I know last time we were concerned that there was to be an offset, and that was something that we wanted to find out about, so that not being the case is great. Does anybody have any questions about the elimination of fines or that we want to discuss right now?
I think at one point you said that the amount of time and effort spent by the staff just to collect and process the fines was almost as much money as the fines. So it's not really, let's say, recovering much of the cost of having a book delivered late, brought back late. It's actually just creating, let's call it a stir for the staff, and doesn't have any real impacts on patron behavior, if you put it that way. That's my impression.
You're correct, yes.
What happens next?
What happens next is when you look at the slides, this is one of the items that is in the slides for you to go through. And after that, then we would be looking at whether adding it in the mid-budget hearing or go to the Finance Committee meeting. So that would be the next steps. Or to the next budget meeting.
I just had a question about so it's not, the fines don't go into the library budget, but they do go into the city's general fund, and so we don't have to replace the funds in the general fund?
Not, I mean, so not as an offset kind of thing. I mean, potentially, of course, anything that, potentially anything that, you know, there's a loss, we'll definitely be looking at it. But it's not something that directly impacts the library budget. And I wanted to just make sure that that's captured here.
I don't see it in one of the slides here. Are we supposed to have, that might be something that we need to add to it if we want to make that aware, Council.
Oh, I apologize. I think
No,
I think that was in an earlier version,
version.
probably.
Okay, if we can just make a note to, we're going to talk about the deck in 1 minute, but that might just be one thing. where
To
the-
maybe add that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was curious, since there's precedent, right? We eliminated the children's library fines, and the revenue went down by about the same amount we're talking about now, back in 2017. And since Monique's here, I don't know if you could speak to that, what the process was then, or how that, what the next steps were, you know, and if that would apply to this situation or not. Is that, would that be helpful?
Hi, Monique Zizvani, Library Director and Interim Assistant City Manager. So in 2017, because we collect fines and they were not necessarily, there was not a different fine for children or adults, I made the decision to just say, let's not collect fines on children's materials. A lot of it because we had many first-time users who were parents, who would come and check out 40 picture books and take them home. And maybe remember that they had to bring them back or not, but, or half were under the bed, whatever. And so we had a high number of about 20-minute phone calls, right? Where sometimes they would get to me and I would say, we'll figure it out, you know, we're not here to punish you. But I think it deterred people from coming back because it was a different experience as a family. So in that case, we administratively removed the ability of a children's item to trigger a fine. Adult items still doing that because of the way that they're coded in the catalog. And we kind of wanted to see what would the effect be. So you saw it was a pretty big, I mean, you know, as fines go, it was about half of the fines. But to administratively remove them from the fees and fines program of the budget, of the city budget, we need the city council to actually weigh in and administratively vote to remove or eliminate them entirely. We could also tell the computer not not to count it. I think to your question though, oh, well, we don't put it into, it's not part of the library's revenue specifically, but it is the revenue contribution to the city budget. Every finance director with whom I have ever worked, I have been clear to say, if we could get this right, we would never collect any fines at all, and you would have nothing. So don't count on us to fund anything major. And in a lot of jurisdictions, that money would stay separate from the general fund and only pay for something like additional copies of bestsellers, something like that, so that if we didn't collect money, then we wouldn't be able to buy more, but it would not have a big effect on the budget. So they do count it as, we expect that we'll get about, I don't know, $70,000 from the library, but they also know that if we don't, maybe we'll look for other options like passport office, test proctoring, some other kind of service, but it's a pretty de minimis amount from the whole budget. So we won't be on the hook. We're always looking for ways to recover costs and to, create more revenue, but that is not our primary focus.
If we decide to recommend dropping fines, I assume when an item is late being returned, you still contact the person and say, where is it? It's overdue. When are you going to bring it back? You're not going to just let it sit there regardless whether we are collecting money or not.
Yes, we will do that. And then if an item is lost, that we will still be collecting revenue for that, yes.
Do you want a recommendation from the commission or?
So, last time we made the motion and the decision was made to vote to support recommending the banishment of fines, and that passed unanimously. So I think it was just we didn't know, we should include it in the presentation, or y'all can bring it to council on your own.
So I think it's a good thing to include it in the presentation that you're making this recommendation. And whether it would come up as part of the mid-year budget review or the annual budget review, that sort of can be handled by the Office of Management and Budget. And the other piece of that, the automatic renewal goes hand in hand with it. We will be able to see what change that makes as well, so.
Yeah, it would be already, because if it's already implemented, then we'd have like a month of it. So you could even just say every month we're collecting $5,000 to $6,000. So if already you're seeing, that's down to 1,000 or something, you can already show that effect. Yeah. Okay. So we don't have any motions on this because we already support this, and it's just putting it in the deck. Yeah, they're written down. If there's no other questions on this, we've spoken about the deck enough. So let's go to that. That's number 3 in the packet. So Gayatri and the staff and a number of us have worked on this, and so we can kind of do a quick walkthrough of this, but everyone should have seen before, where we really want to, the purpose of the deck is really to show a lot of the accomplishments that the library's done and the great services that we have. So we begin with showing our 5 libraries. We show where we'll just kind of run through them quick, how pretty they are, and then we have a map showing kind of where they are distributed by the neighborhoods. And then you have some of the big facts that are really just impressive, with the 1 million visitors, how big our collection is, how many people are coming, just really impressive large numbers of the impact.
On that slide, is that, the rest of the deck looks like it's 2018 highlights. Is this the last 12 months for 2019?
It's like now the last 12 months.
Okay.
So
Okay.
halves and halves.
Okay.
But it's a valid question. Are all these other highlights, did all of them happen only in 2018?
A lot of them, we have also, anytime, anything that we can collect information, those are up to the last fiscal year. So the new fiscal year started in July. So a lot of those are the 18, 19,
So it's like 2018 fiscal year
Yeah.
is what all of this
18, 19, yeah.
is.
One of the things that struck me about libraries in the last 12 months, it might not be a bad idea to have an additional slide that compares circulation per capita and annual visits per capita with Palo Alto compared to other cities, because we have a lot more library usage than almost any other city around here. And I don't think it'd be a bad idea to point that out, to have a slide that compares our performance with Mountain View, Menlo Park, Redwood City, pick up half a dozen nearby cities and compare our circulation per capita, our visits per capita with theirs, and show how we're doing quite well. I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
To just follow up on what Commissioner Murphy just mentioned, is that maybe instead of saying the 2018 or the last 12 months, we just say like FY18 for just everything.
Yeah.
So that's on, I mean, it's almost on like every slide. But we'll
Okay, we could do
4 to
that.
14. I think that works. Good points, good points. The structure of this is following the strategic plan. And so it's kind of like, hey, what is our goal of what to do and then how have we done it? So with being the place when everyone can learn anything, talking about the Palo Alto Student Access Card Initiative, where we got thousands of students with their cards being able to use them, to the youth teen writing context, with it twice as many entries as before, to the short story dispenser, which is out here before a year or two ago, but now at Mitchell Park Library. It's really showing how people are really coming to us from different places, different ways. Slide 9, we talk about being the partner of choice and really talking about a lot of our cool offerings, our multicultural offerings with the Chinese New Year, the Diwali event, really attracting large numbers of people to some things like our Maker Fair. And then to the comment that Bob talked about earlier on slide 12 with how we are able to leverage technology, we just have so many great resources. And so talking about the robotics program and the 3D printer and virtual reality and all the things going on there, which are really just wonderful, and the cybersecurity education. So that kind of brings us up to 14, which is a summary of libraries being amazing. And then when we start going from 15 to 18, it's then saying some of the recommendations or goals that we want to do. So that's where we have digital space to kind of focus our technology, training Palo Alto teachers, brain fuse for parents and student groups, and then engaging with the school students for the summer learning, and then the technology, something that's occasional, making it more permanent, having more lectures, and then with some of the marketing thing, we do so well that we want to be able to share that message better, even with these director reports that we see that are so amazing, and getting those out more. The revenue generation, which is the passport thing that you mentioned as well. And then the last recommendation here is about the library advisory commission as a whole, and the question of, in light of there not being any current or recent major issues requiring oversight, allowing the staff to use time to provide more library services to the committee instead of supporting the commission. I think the Library Advisory Commission, it's existed for more than 20 years now, and it's helped to create an amazing, strong foundation for the Palo Alto libraries. It was created when the city was really struggling to renovate and update our libraries, which were in a rough state. And over the years, this commission has been instrumental in creating like the Lismar report, passing the bond, and ensuring that our libraries were rebuilt and are renovated and are the amazing system that we have today. I've been on the commission for about 2.5 years, really enjoyed serving on the library commission, and I think I've just slowly been coming to the realization that I feel like the commission's purpose has been completed, and part of that is evident with the 1 million visitors that we have, or 2,300 visitors on a single day to one of our libraries, that we have this Palo Alto system that's really leading in technology, community outreach, and other programming. So that's something that I'd like to make a motion on in a little bit, but I'd like to open it up to discussion, comments and questions about any of the recommendations, but especially the final one.
I don't happen to agree that the Library Commission is done with our activities and we can disband it. It would be very unusual to disband a council-appointed commission. And of all of the community services offered, when they do the annual survey of the community, what does the city provide that you're interested in? Number one is fire, number two is police, number three is libraries. And that's been true for years, where after you get through public safety, libraries are the city programs that the people most value and most seem to respect. The other thing is that library performance and library offerings, if you will, aren't static. They change over time, as you've been seeing with the other items that are listed doing. 5 years ago, a lot of these things weren't being done. And a third point is that the commissions are an entity that the community can go to and feel comfortable speaking to and saying, gee, I have a problem, or gee, I'd like to see more of this, or why do we have this instead of that? Some people feel a little bit reluctant to go to the city council or to the staff if they have an alternate, like a commission. And I see that quite a bit with the Architectural Review Board and the Planning Commission, among others. So I don't think that the Library Commission has ended its usefulness, and I think we ought to remain as an organization. So I'll hear what the other commissioners have to say, but my personal feeling is that that item doesn't belong in the suggestions for future actions.
Other comments from commissioners?
I'd like to hear staff's thoughts and recommendations.
I would say when this idea was brought up, we've always worked with commissions, and I personally have worked with different commissions. But part of the reason why we worked with the commission, I was part of the Santa Clara County Library System, and the commission was a good way for the library to connect to the city department, because we were not a part of the cities, we were part of the Santa Clara County. So the usefulness of a commission was greatly emphasized because of that, because they were the liaison between the county and the city. So that was a different kind of usefulness, and I do think you are great advocates for the library. And but one of the things that we did talk about was it does allow staff to use time to provide different services to the community. So there's two sides of it. The decision is finally yours to make, and I can, we would support you in whatever decision that you want to make.
So, I'm not an expert on the Brown Act, but I'm just not sure. So I think the item on the agenda is the slide deck, and this is an item in the slide deck, but it hasn't come up before. So it's, I guess as far as the slide deck goes, I'm not sure. I feel like I don't think it's ready to be presented. I'd assume we'd want to have a discussion before we'd present it to council if they're looking for our opinion. I mean, ultimately, I think it's their decision, but I'm not sure. Feel comfortable discussing the item, until we notice the item, and then people have a chance to come comment as well. So I look for guidance on if it is a Brown Act issue or a Sunshine issue. I don't want to run, our discussion to run afoul of that or any motions. And it's an interesting thought, and maybe worth discussing. I just want to make sure we discuss it the right way. Okay.
that makes sense. Thanks for sharing that. Councilwoman Cormack, do you have any comments on sort of the fact that the agenda item mentions the deck is published in advance and available to the public, and or how that is susceptible to the Brown Act?
I can't comment on the interpretation of that. I have read the deck. I am prepared to discuss the item, but unfortunately, I'm not an expert on the Brown Act with respect to commissions. Any thoughts?
You're looking at me like I'm an expert.
Well, okay.
Lawyer Esquire Monique, approach
I
the
mean,
bench.
this is a noticed meeting.
It is, the meeting is noticed.
The deck was available to the public.
Right. But again, to have that, you're correct, probably, if that was the actual motion. Now, it could be whether or not it's included in the deck or your presentation or whatever, that's entirely up to you. So if the commission says, we like this as an idea for discussion and we want to bring it to council's attention, and then they will likely say, go back and discuss it more, or come back with an actual staff report kind of thing where you make a formal recommendation. Then you would likely have to bring it back at a following meeting and discuss it and have the chance for the community to speak to it. But I do agree that it's probably the deck. It was in the content. Somebody could be here, right, if they had so chosen to say, I don't understand where this came from, or I support that idea and think it's great, you know. So, but I think that not having been through the process before, my guess about the process would be if that was a recommendation that was included in the deck, you guys would make it, there would be some discussion from council or not, or maybe make a recommendation to come back to the commission for further discussion and an actual plan if that was the case, if that was what you wanted to pursue.
So I think what we're discussing here is, like, we're gonna keep fire, police, and libraries. We're not getting rid of libraries.
No.
Like, we just wanna keep the staff to be able to provide even more services. The staff will continue to innovate in our dynamic times, never being static. We have examples here of emails of people trying to reach out to us and be a public forum, and we'd welcome people to come to our meetings anytime. I think it is a gray area, so perhaps a motion that says we recommend disbanding the library commission is something that would be not quite appropriate, but a motion to say including this recommendation in the deck would be appropriate in the sense that it definitely is the deck that we're talking about, the content in the deck, and what we can include in the deck. Yes. So I think that motion would be quite appropriate. However, I agree with the idea that we want to talk about it. So if somebody else also feels really strongly about any other item of saying, like, sharing monthly director's reports, we could have a discussion about that, cut it out or include it. And so similarly, this is another item in the deck, but to just do the full disband, I don't think would be appropriate. That also being said, we have no power to create or uncreate ourselves. So any recommendation from us is not going to disband or end us. In the end, it will just be a recommendation that City Council would then be acting upon, and the discussion would be there.
I think if you want to, let's say, discuss or have the deck discuss the Library Commission's viability, a better way to do it would be to say to the council, are you interested in evaluating the usefulness of the Library Commission and whether or not it should be continued? Because that's in the end, it's a council decision. And not make a recommendation ourselves one way or the other, but just say, well, what do you think? And do you feel that the commission still provides valuable information and valuable benefits to you and the community? Or do you think it'd be better to just say thank you and goodbye? But let the council address the issue themselves rather than ours telling them offhand, with a bit of surprise, gee, we think we ought to do this. So I think a better way to do it would just be say, give it to the council, and let the council review it and review the commission's usefulness to them and to the community, and then come back with their suggestions. Seems more reasonable to me.
Councilmember Kamak, would you guys come back and say, we want your recommendation?
So so two things. One is I can't speak for everyone else, but I'd prefer to reserve my comments until all of you have completed your discussion on this item.
I'm still a little confused. Are we allowed to discuss the item, or we can only discuss whether it's in the deck?
We can discuss anything that we want. I think the point that Doug was talking about is saying it's inappropriate to make a motion to dissolve when that action item wasn't directly on the agenda. Is that correct, what your point was?
I don't know. I've done the training. I don't know enough about it to say discussion versus motion. It seems to me a motion is one step beyond. So, I wouldn't recommend we do that, but it's even in, a discussion, I just don't know how that works. I don't know the ins and outs of it. So I can't really say either way.
So in the medical field, when you don't know, typically you try not to act. And this may be one of those kinds of situations. Rather than either we go get a Brown Act opinion from counsel, from legal counsel, which I imagine is going to take something in the realm of months, or we postpone action on this this particular motion until we're better informed.
Well, we know that we can at least talk about whether to include an item in the deck about the viability of the council. So we can at least have that discussion.
Agreed.
I, for one, think that we should bring it to council to talk about.
Because, Bob made a recommendation that we include specific items in that deck, so that could be included in the motion, that we, that you're going to accept the, use this slide deck as the basis of your presentation with the recommended changes, or as is, or with these changes. So you could probably include that as, as part of the thing. But I would agree that you should probably talk about whether or not we're talking about what to include in the presentation that you'll share with the council. And then beyond that, you wouldn't make a recommendation about the actual action of the item.
I suggest respectfully that for this commission to send forth a deck recommending its own disbanding sends a relatively strong signal to the council, and that may or may not be what a majority of us wish.
In terms of content for the deck that might help the council with this discussion, I'd be interested in understanding from council members how many contacts with library advisory commissioners they've had. I know in my 2.5 years, this is the first time we're going before council, and so I'm just not sure what value council is getting, and so perhaps content for the deck that would help them make a decision would be some of those contacts and the frequency with commission members. Maybe I'm the only one that hasn't had any contact, but.
I also have not had any contact with the council members yet. And so when I look at the purpose of the Library Advisory Council, like Law 2.2 is our purpose is to advise the city council on things. And so if we haven't had contact with the city council and telling them in my 2.5 years, that's where I think that's different than 20 years ago when they're providing these studies and the LISMAR report and providing that.
I'm biased. This is my second meeting. And this is kind of a reverse Groucho Marx. Yeah, never be a member of a club who would have you. Well, I joined the club, and now we're not going to be a club.
Now, I want to point out that we do have annual meetings with the council. And sometimes it slips a little bit, but we've met almost every year that I've been on the commission. And at that point, there is interaction between the commission and the council and the community, which is at the council meeting at the time. So there's some interaction. It may be kind of casual, it may not be into a lot of depth, but we're there, we're talking, they're there, they're listening. And so they know we exist, and they have an opportunity, if they have some issues, to bring them up at that point. So it's not like we're off on a side and have no contact with the council at all or with council members. We may get less contact than we think is useful, but it's there. And so I think it'd be more appropriate to ask the council how they feel about the commission's performance and contribution, and do they feel that we're worth keeping, or do they want to consider disbanding us or changing how we operate or something like that. That, I think, would be worth putting in the deck. But I would give it to the council as an item to think about and get back to us with, not as a position that we're taking ourselves.
Could we ask staff to provide the date of the last council meeting that we attended? It's maybe 2016?
I think it was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I can give the exact dates.
I think as the members of the commission who meet every 2 months, we're the most intimately aware of the impact that we have. And I think if we haven't met with them in 3 years, I'm sure they're aware that the libraries are amazing. I'm not sure that they're aware of the contributions that the Library Advisory Commission has done in recent months and recent years if there hasn't been that contact happening there. So I think as far as having an opinion, we don't drive the council, we're an advisory. And so I think as part of that advice, it's having a position. The council can go against us or for us, and there's no, that's what they do, is they're the ones that ultimately have to make the decision. There will be discussion at the meeting. Even at October, I presume there'd be follow-on meetings in October and November where this would have to happen, where the community would be there. There's more people, I believe, that come to city council meetings than come to our meetings, and so it's even probably a better venue. So all of the priorities, recommendations at the end, all of these are things that, for or against the council can discuss and say, we don't want fines eliminated, but we recommended that fines be eliminated, and that's a decision, and it impacts, revenue. So I don't think us having a recommendation limits the council and their ability to make any choices.
Switching subjects slightly, I wondered if staff could describe how this final recommendation fits into the strategic plan.
Is there anything specific you're asking, or general overall, like how it fits into the strategic plan?
How it fits into the strategic plan. So we've heard a little bit in discussion about the charter for the commission. I assume that the other guiding document has to do with what the strategic plan for the library is. And I'm curious about how this fits, and how the staff plan to, in the absence of a commission, obtain community input, particularly from newer community members.
We'd be happy to do a report on that and present it to you.
Would it be possible to see that prior to the deck going to the council?
Yes.
Thanks.
Not to keep harping on the quantity issue, but I'm just curious, and this is maybe, again, content to include in the deck, how many contacts with community members have commissioners had? Because the emails and whatnot that we get don't go to commissioners, they go to the library and they're included in our packet. And so I'm curious, is everyone else getting like tons of contact from the community? I'm not.
So I'm a new member, and I have to confess to being surprised by Brigham's call and to appreciate the early information and the heads up that he provided. And I went and asked 43 of our friends, knowing nothing, or certainly less than I do, about a library commission, whether they had an opinion one way or the other as to whether or not it ought to exist. And their very first question was, why now?
So I think that's a really good question, but could we first answer Commissioner Murphy's question of maybe Doug and Bob, if you could say like the frequency of community members coming to you instead of coming to, I think that's a really good question. Let's come back to that. But talking about, because I also am very involved in the community, Citizen Police Academy, community gardens, and I tell everybody I'm on the board, I have the business cards right inside my door. And so can we say, like, of that being the voice of we need to be the intermediary, could you help us understand that volume? And then let's please come back to what Pancho said.
I've had a few neighbors ask me about library issues, but it's not common. For example, when Mitchell Park was closed, I occasionally had people ask me, when's it going to reopen? And I forget when it was, but the hours of operation changed one year. And I had somebody stop me and say, yeah, I went to the library and it was still closed. When did they change the hours? And then is it going to go back again? But it's not, common. I don't have a lot of people that ask me things a lot of times. And my impression is, if nothing significant is happening with the library or library service, then people don't feel they have to contact anybody or contact the commissioner. So if they're, my interpretation, maybe it's not right, but my interpretation is that people are fairly satisfied with the library and library operation, so they don't feel they have to come to me and make any complaints.
That's great. So the staff is doing a great job in not needing that. Councilman Hagan, what sort of outreach from community members have you received in recent years or months?
So I think our role is to provide feedback to the council when we can. Sometimes the council directs us, but we've got to provide them feedback. I don't feel comfortable discussing this right now because I don't feel like it's been noticed properly. And the way I get to that is, to put this in a slide to council, I feel like we need to do our homework, right? We don't just throw issues at the council, we study them, right? So we did talk about the fines. We had a very good presentation by the intern. We had a great discussion. There was opportunity for people to provide input. So I don't feel like we can put anything on here without really having done a little bit of homework on it. And to do that, I think we need to have a proper discussion about it. And I just don't see that happening in this time frame and the way this is all going down, unless we postpone the meeting with council to do it, which is fine. So, I've never had anyone in the community come up to me and say disband the library commission. I can say that for sure. But I would want to hear from the community, if that's our job, is to provide feedback on library issues, including our own existence. I'd want to hear from the community. There's other stakeholders than us. There's the Friends of the Palo Alto Library. There's a number of folks, and I think we'd want to hear that before we presented a recommendation to council. So anyway, so I feel like I'm not ready to discuss the topic until we can do it the right way.
Commissioner Murphy, you had asked when was the last time that we met. It was on the memo last time we met. The last time the joint meeting was held was October 4th, 2016.
Thank you. That was 3 years ago. Okay, so
If
Please.
has everyone had an opportunity? I don't want to. Okay. So I'm going to have some comments about process and then some comments about the potential of this policy as well. And it's perfectly appropriate in my mind to discuss the slide. That's fine. As I listen to some of the concerns, I think there's a couple things that need to happen, and I think one is probably a review of an actual presentation on why the Library Advisory Commission was created and what it's accomplished. So I think those would be important things for people to know before they make a recommendation. I think Commissioner Hagan's suggestion of deferring the study session with the council is a good one. Traditionally, that's a study session, so that would not be an opportunity for us to take action. I haven't seen study sessions that have action items. They're usually separated. So from a process standpoint, this would be an appropriate venue to discuss whether, understand more about the creation of the Library Advisory Commission, its accomplishments, and any recommendations that you would like to make to council. We do have a lot on our plate, and we do appreciate it. I certainly appreciate it when, commissions do the work of thinking through things and making sure that the public has an opportunity to participate. So from a process standpoint, it's possible that you would want to defer coming to council until you've had an opportunity to think through this policy. So that's on a process standpoint. I commend Chair Wilson for bringing this to everyone's attention. And I'll just signal my thoughts on this policy. And forgive me for a moment, because not all of you are familiar with my background, and some of you are unfamiliar with, didn't live here when all this started. So we had significant problems with our physical libraries at the end of last century, and we did a bond, and the bond failed. And then we had a new library director, and that library director did not work here for as long as I think many of us had hoped, and there was a different suggestion at the time for how to do our libraries. And then there was the library service model analysis and recommendations. If you haven't read the LISMAR from 2006, I encourage you to do it. It really is, I think, the hallmark of what the Library Advisory Commission achieved and the foundation for the libraries that we have today. And it was this that I used to chair the bond. And then it was this also that I used as president of Palo Alto Library Foundation. So that was $76 million for the bond, and then $4 million with the Library Foundation, with a very large team of people. Did not do this on my own. So I think it's important to understand that. One of the other things you may not know is that we shut down the Palo Alto Library Foundation. It was not an easy decision for everyone. Frankly, for some people it was emotional, and for some people it was more a question of efficiency, and for many of us it was really both of those things. And so that's why I commend the chair for being willing to bring this up and to thoroughly consider it. So I think this would be an appropriate thing to bring to council, and it may just be that you need a little bit more time as a group to reflect on it and then you will make a recommendation, and it may not be unanimous, and that happens, and it might be, and that's fine. So let me see if I've communicated things I wanted to talk about, which is I think this is an idea worth considering, and I think this venue might, I think delaying the meeting with the council might give all of you an opportunity to have a better understanding of the accomplishments, and the community a better opportunity to participate in the process. And this may not be a one-step thing. It may be there's a meeting here, and then you have a study session with council, and then maybe we'll have an action item, and it could go a variety of ways. So those are my thoughts on this. But what I really want to get across is that the first 17 slides really get at how lucky we are to live here, to have these libraries, to be able to fund them at the tune of $10 million a year in operating costs, to have a community that's willing to support them, to have thousands of people use them every day. So that's the main message that I would like to get across. And the reality is that the people who sat at this table long before us, laid the groundwork for us to be able to enjoy that today. So.
Cool, thank you for that. Indeed, the commission and the library it's not like separate for performance, separate purposes, and both have done so much great work over previous years, and we are so blessed to be here and the things that we have. So, based on the words in the room, what I would propose is that we would schedule our normal meeting in October, postpone the council meeting to like a November time. That would give us opportunity to do what Commissioner Chang did, which I think was great, of talking to some of our community members and perhaps informing them of what the commission has done and things to do in the future, and therefore getting their feedback on that so we can share that. I think with Commissioner Hagan's idea is let's make sure when we say an agenda for the next meeting that this is an item on it, and therefore having that public notice so that if people want to come, they have the opportunity to come here and comment on it, so that that process can be like, say we feel comfortable, not just discussing it in a gray zone, but like very clearly that like it's been brought up here, and then we're having the follow process. We can have a motion on that, but does someone want to talk about what I just said?
The only other thing I'd be interested in getting from staff so that we can talk about it at the next meeting would be, so we talked about including the Library Advisory Commission's contributions over the years. I'd especially be interested in those more recently. An observation is that we are often getting updates of things that have already happened, and so we're not necessarily making decisions or providing a ton of input. So if we can put particular emphasis on things where we have provided a recommendation that was then implemented, that would be helpful.
Sure, we can include that.
I'm not too clear, where do we leave this? This is going to be deferred while we have another meeting where we discuss it in more detail and postpone the coordinated meeting with the city council for at least a month. Is that the intent? That's the impression I got, but I wanted to verify that.
That was what I said.
I don't think we need a motion for that. As chair, you work to set the agenda. So I think it's really in your purview to, when at the end of the meeting, we'll talk about what ideas we have, and then you work with staff to figure out what makes a good agenda. So I think if that's the way we want to go, then that's, I don't think we need a motion to do that.
Okay, sounds good. So let's pretend to skip ahead to 8:25 and make sure it's on the next agenda that we'll discuss this. Postpone the meeting, and then I think that's all for that discussion item. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your thoughts. Our final point is the June and July monthly director's report. We've all had a chance to look at it. Does anybody have any and then for our millions of viewers at home, we also have we have an At Places announcement, which I feel makes sense to talk about this with the monthly report, where Macmillan, now you have to like buy only one digital copy, then you have to wait 8 weeks, and then you can buy more. So is it just trying to push you to buy the print more instead of the digital, or trying to maybe?
Or have consumers buy their own e-materials.
Oh, okay. Book publishers. Cool. So that's that. Are there any other comments or questions about either the June or the July or the impact of this e-policy that Commissioner would like to share?
Could you speak a little bit about Brain Fuse?
Sure. Brain Fuse is an organization that we have, is a vendor that we hired to provide direct tutoring service to students. So what they do is there's actually a live tutor on the other end when a student goes into it. And it's not even just limited to students. There's also an adult version for other skill building. But essentially, a lot of students use it to go and they do homework help, but also skill building. Like you can actually send an essay, and they'll actually proofread it for you, but not just provide you answer, but actually guide you to write better. I've even pretended to be a student and done things, and it's been actually very interesting. They are very good. They will not give you the answer. They'll make you get to it. I think it's one of those underrated, underused gems that we have, and it is something that I would really like to promote to the schools, because I think students will really use it. One of the places that we really want to promote is actually to the parents, because it's such a relief. It's 8 o'clock and your child wants an answer and you're really not as skilled as you thought you were because you've forgotten your math. It's a really great place to go. And the skill building, I cannot say enough of that. You can, even your college essays, you can send it and you can get guidance from them. They're very, very, their tutors are very highly skilled, and this is something that I've had lots of parents groups, like the PTAs, get very excited about at other places, and that is something that I would love to promote more to the schools and to the parents, and to the students, of course, ultimately. I can also send a link to their website or, find more information and share that with you, if that's something that you would be interested in.
So I had just a question about the June and July reports. I think we're on that. Okay, good. So I was just wondering about the event statistics, right? And I know that as a community, we invested in our infrastructure, right? And that's the plan that established the new libraries and the renovations. And, when I first got on the board, I can't even remember what year that was, 4 or 5 years ago, there's a lot of excitement around the events, and getting people to use the libraries as a place to learn literacy beyond just books, right? And I know we've been very successful in increasing those numbers. I do notice that over time, it seems like there's less events that are bigger, right? If you look at the numbers, the average size of the event's gone up, but there are less of them. And I just wasn't sure, overall in terms of how if there's a way to characterize that. Is that part of the strategy? Is it staff? I just wasn't sure what, in terms of that trend, if we could characterize it. Or maybe it's just a blip in the summer, I don't know. But
Actually, it's a combination of many things, and I would say one of the things that, there's several things that I think has contributed to this. One is our staffing situation last year. We lost quite a few youth services librarians, which, including the teen services librarian, which kind of really put a stress on the number of programming that we offered. So that's a big one. But overall, too, we have been looking at programming and what the impact is in the community. I mean, we don't want to just do a program just to show the statistics, but to really evaluate and see if there's, one of the decisions when we are looking at programming is like, is somebody else doing it? Are people actually coming to use it? Has the trend changed? So all that factors into that. And right now, we actually have a new process that we have introduced called like programming ideation, where there's like a committee that's actually like doing a demographic evaluation and looking at where our programs are fitting in right now and are we missing programming. So to us, like one side is we want to do programming that, brings the community together. The other side, which is like it's a long spectrum, is to do programming that perhaps nobody else will be doing. It's like that story times that is something that we provide for the autistic spectrum kids, because I don't think there's anybody else that's doing it. Right. So those are the two almost like other sides of programming that we do, and that's what makes the library still a welcoming place for everybody. So yes, there is definitely a blip in the numbers, and hopefully we are starting to hire, and the interviews are going on, and things are moving, and we're really hoping to see an increase in the number of programs, but also with the emphasis in marketing to make sure that people know about these programs. And one of the things that we really do want to do aggressively this year is marketing to the schools, because that's, it is something that every school student now has a library card, and so, hopefully the usage will increase, but also for them to know more about our programming and to kind of tailor to programming that students need. So that is something that we're definitely looking into. But last year was a tough year, I think, from staffing point of view, definitely.
Has your staffing recovered enough so that you can get back to what you were doing a couple of years ago, where you were still trying to staff up?
We're still working on it. It takes a while to get people in, and this is also a time when unemployment is 2.9%. So, we're keeping all that in mind. We do want to do more programming because I do think there's a lot of expectation from the library, and also provide the kind of programs that people need.
I've heard comments from some of the other managers in the city that they're having problems hiring people just because of the economy. So I'm not surprised that the library is having problems staffing up too.
All right, thank you so much. Good question. We have on the agenda Council Liaison's report. Councilman Cormack, do you have any other items that you would like to present to us?
No, the major work that the council is doing, grade separation, I don't think is necessarily relevant to Library Advisory Commission. But we are working on a business tax again, potentially, which is probably also not relevant to the Library Advisory Commission. Climate change, sorry, I'm just going through my list. I don't think there's anything recently. We discussed the budget the last time. That's really the main interaction, right, that the council tends to have with the library is the budget. And I mentioned that last time, so I don't believe there's anything that we're doing that's directly relevant at the moment. If I think of something, I'll let you know.
Thank you. Are there any other commissioners who have reports or questions that they want to bring up? Okie doke. I'm not sure what comments and our announcements are. I'll announce that we're near the end of our meeting and comment that that's great. Agenda for the next meeting, we have the existing item of directly discussing the topic of the Library Advisor Commission, its purpose, and its future. Are there other items that commissioners would like us to discuss in our next meeting?
So I just following up on that question, I would be interested to get an overview, if possible, of, the programs. What's driving those, I mean, it's not about the numbers, but, where are we doing work and how has it changed over the last few years? What's kind of just an overall strategy around the services. Now, it sounds like the youth piece isn't quite in place right now, so maybe it would be what's still going, and we'd save that piece for when there's a new librarian. But if there was a way, just to give us an overview of some of the programs we've been running and what's been working, what we're trying to do better or whatever I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can do that.
I think the programming issue is very important, and one of the aspects you might want to consider is how does the library work with the school district, for example, in identifying programs that are necessary and operating them, identifying locations where they're going to be held, cooperating, whatever. Because there's inherently an interaction between the library and the school district, and we have schools that are right next to the library, One of the other things that struck me is that we have facilities that most libraries don't have. The Children's Library, for example, and the community center right next to Mitchell Park Library, so you can have events in rooms right next to the library or within the library, where many library systems can't do that. So is that something that we're really using? Is that something the school district could use if we were working with them? How's the cooperation working? Do we need to go out to the school district more, or are we doing what we should be doing? I don't know, but I think it's worth discussing next month.
I think the school library card has really opened a lot of possibilities, and we definitely have a better working relationship with them. But that was mostly with, I would say, with the school librarians, and I was very delighted we actually hosted a school librarian meeting at the library here and gave them a tour. And I was delighted to see that actually a lot of the school librarians knew more about the resources than I would have ever imagined. And they really do promote it to their students. So the next part of it, it's almost like a triangle. It's one is, school librarians, that's a key element. But then there is the parents, and then on the other side is teachers, and in the middle are the kids, the students. So it's we've done this to the student and the school librarians, but now we want to interact with the parents as well as the teachers, knowing very well that their time is very, very, very tight with a lot of stuff that they have to do. So, we're trying to find where's that opportunity where we can provide resources that the school district does not have. The school district does not have some of the really amazing resources that we have, including BrainFuse, right? So we're trying to find those and then promote those. And then the other opportunity is to present to PTAs and other parent groups. So that is another piece that we're looking into this year. So this year, that would be two of the things that we really do want to do.
I think that's a good idea.
Thank you.
Commissioners Hagan or Murphy, anything? Okay, so then you have those 3 items for the agenda. Next meeting, October 24th.
I'm sorry, maybe it's too late. We haven't adjourned yet. But I did read the email that you included. I wasn't sure if that's something we want to discuss in the future around our re-authentication policy on our network. I don't know what's typical or if that's an issue, but I did notice the comment and I wasn't sure why we do it. So if at the next meeting, Brigham, maybe that's a topic we could just touch on. If there's a policy or some reason behind it, that'd be great.
Okay.
I'll just offer it's probably a city IT thing as opposed to a library one, because you get kicked off pretty regularly on the here as well. I'm saying you might want to just check with IT. That would be my first place to check as opposed to the library. Having been at many of our city facilities and libraries, it is and there may be some, it's likely that there's some security reasons, so not library specific, it's a citywide policy.
Cool, so maybe not an agenda item, but a memo, like, it can just be included.
I'm happy to write a memo.
Cool.
We're librarians, we can provide you the information.
Where can you find it? In a book? Sounds great. Thank you so much, all the commissioners, for being here, Councilman Cormac, and directors, and Gayatri and Josh. Do we have any movements can we have a movement to adjourn the meeting?
I'll move to adjourn.
Someone second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you and have a pleasant evening.